Stop the insanity. Get your focus back onto what really matters in life. Your family, your finances, your faith, and your future. Sit back, listen, and change the trajectory of your life. You are listening to the Money for Life podcast. Let's welcome your hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
All right, Money for Life community. This is Rick Sapio with Teresa Kuhn, my partner. And we're so long-term oriented, and we want to give people advice that they could put on the ground immediately. And one of the things we're going to talk about today involves your financial success. It involves your business. It also involves your personal life, and it's the notion of something that we've gone out and trademarked. It's called a catalyzing statement. So a catalyzing statement is a statement. It's not a mission or a purpose. It's different because it catalyzes action in you, in your employees, in your family members, in your community, in your church, in wherever you want action to be catalyzed. But it does take work. And when people put the work in, or they get lucky, and they come up with the right catalyzing statement, magic ensues. So where do you want to start, Teresa?
So let's start with just a couple examples of catalyzing statements so people can understand that catalyzing statements aren't that complicated, right? And people do complicate the whole concept of catalyzing statement. I've seen you teach this for years and people shut down because it sounds so complicated. But here are a couple really great catalyzing statements that people may relate to. One of them is Domino's Pizza.
So let's talk about Domino's Pizza, and let's talk about my favorite pizza when I was growing up, which is Lovey's Pizza. Lovey's was way better pizza than Domino's, but Lovey's did not have a catalyzing statement. And a catalyzing statement catalyzes action in your stakeholders. So if you love pizza, or you love delivering pizza, or you love owning a franchise for a pizzeria, a good catalyzing statement is Domino's catalyzing statement, which at the time when they really took off was 30 minutes or less. 30 minutes or less, or it's free. It catalyzed action in hungry people that wanted food fast. It catalyzed action in people who ultimately became franchise owners and managers of Domino's because they were the drivers that knew the product and knew how to deliver the product and knew the routes. And so you think about Domino's was built on a whole massive group of people that were catalyzed into action by 30 minutes or less. So let's unpack a good catalyzing statement. And you could have one for your family or your personal life, but let's unpack what it is. It starts with a clear purpose statement. An example is Microsoft, a computer on every desktop. And that had thousands of people march forward to help them from the engineering perspective and the software development perspective and the sales perspective. But also people in the world were like, wow, it's a really cool statement. But once it happens, they realize that catalyzed action. So one of the ones I love to use, and there's thousands of them, but Volvo, their catalyzing statement, we build the safest cars in the world. Now, I'm asking you as a listener, and Teresa, you as my partner here, what would that statement catalyze? What groups of people? We build the safest cars in the world. Who got catalyzed from that?
Well, guess who has owned two Volvos in her life?
You, a mommy.
A mommy right here. We own two Volvos and we love those cars. I was safe. My baby was safe.
A good catalyzing statement catalyzes everyone. How about the engineers who build cars? Wouldn't they be more proud to build this?
Yes.
Wouldn't dealers be more proud to sell the safest cars in the world? Wouldn't people, whether they're consumers or marketers, be more proud to recommend a Volvo? So a good catalyzing statement is something that ensures that your people rise up in all areas. So let's look at another catalyzing statement. That land of the free, home of the brave was something that catalyzed immigrants from all over the world to want to come to the United States of America. That was what catalyzed this great experiment called the United States.
I never thought of that as a catalyzing statement, but isn't that the truth? That's exactly what that is. What about, JFK? His moonshot of having us go to the moon by the end of the 60s. What was that catalyzing statement?
Think about that and all the stakeholders. So let's start with the order of things. So number one, what's the purpose? The purpose that JFK inherited was we're going to beat the Soviets in the space race. But in 1962, he said, I envisioned this. He laid out a plan. He said, we're going to send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of the decade of the 60s, less than 8 years later. So that purpose of beating the Soviets in the space race became a tangible catalyzing statement. And who did it catalyze? It catalyzed thousands of engineers to move to NASA and help. It catalyzed thousands of people to want to be an astronaut. It catalyzed the US government to provide the funding. It catalyzed the citizens of the US to embrace the space race. It catalyzed inventors all over the world to invent materials and machineries that weren't yet invented. Anybody listening to this can string together a group of words that take your purpose statement and bring it to a catalyzing statement. There's so many other examples. I think about me personally. My purpose is to inspire entrepreneurship. That's why I'm talking to you, Teresa, and talking to all of you who are listening to this. And so I take my purpose and how do I make it into a catalyzing statement? And one thing that motivates me and motivates the people that embrace this with me is I envision a world with an entrepreneur inside of every home. There's about 1 billion homes in the world. Imagine a world with an entrepreneur in every home. That completely wakes me up. And for me, an entrepreneur is somebody who takes responsibility for outcomes. And anybody could take responsibility for outcomes. That means being responsible for where you are. It doesn't matter where you came from or that you're broke or that you didn't get the right schooling or you came from the wrong family or you lived on the wrong side of the tracks. None of that matters. The minute you take responsibility for outcomes, you're being an entrepreneur. And my catalyzing statement again is I envision a world with an entrepreneur inside of every home. There's so many of these that we can talk about. So here's the thing. If you're going to have a compelling catalyzing statement that catalyzes action, you first have to start with a purpose statement. And here's where people get it wrong. A purpose statement is 4 or 5 words. That's all it is. I exist to inspire entrepreneurship. That's it. Most people have these long, vision, mission, values, purpose. They try to get it all lumped together. 30 minutes or less. Land of the free, home of the brave. We build the safest cars in the world. None of these are long, drawn out sentences. The one that I think is pretty interesting, that is a little bit longer, but very compelling, when it absolutely has to be there overnight. That was what got FedEx on the map originally in the early 70s. And we all remember those commercials.
That was a big deal back then. If you think about getting delivery overnight. I mean, now we're used to like instantaneous. So Rick, we're talking about an audience that may be entrepreneurs and may not be. They may want to have a catalyzing statement for their life. So what advice would you give them so that they can come up with a purpose for their life and a catalyzing statement around their life?
So when you think about a catalyzing statement, I would assert that you've got a family. What's the purpose of your family? You've got a company you work for. What's the purpose of that company? If you don't have those, figure them out, write them down, take time away from all the chaos of life. Everything that you're involved with in your life could have a purpose statement associated with it. And you could be the driver for that. So once you have a purpose statement, then you have to think about who are the stakeholders? Who are the people that my company affects? Who are the people that my family affects? And then you think about what would catalyze positive action in those stakeholders. And so you have to start with a purpose statement. To go back to the example, Volvo was really just out to build nice sedans. They didn't have a clear purpose statement. But then one of the engineers stepped forth and he said, I want to build the safest cars in the world. And people got so behind that vision that they started to attract the highest quality engineers in the world. See, that catalyzing statement started having so many things happen. It's almost like a positive reinforcing circle where
there's an energy that gets created. Talk about your catalyzing statement for your family. It's so easy. And I think people can resonate with it immediately, those who have children.
We raise, if you're in our family, if you're, whether it's a grandparent or a parent or a child who's going to become a parent, we raise independent, entrepreneurial, God-fearing 18-year-olds. As a child, you're like, yeah, I want to be independent. I want to learn how to make money and start a business. I don't need to be in the backseat of the car being dragged from event to event to event to event. We don't want dependence. We want independence.
But I wanted you to bring that up so that people get, if they're listening, the audience, they're saying, well, I don't really have a business. I don't have a reason to have a purpose for my business or a catalyzing statement. No, you can have one for your family, and look at what you've done with your family, and what a beautiful example. Because if your purpose, like you said, is to raise independent 18-year-olds, then you can filter your decisions based on that. I'm done having kids, but you inspire me to be an aunt that can influence that generation and my grandchildren. I mean, I'm going to be an amazing grandmother thanks to all the things I'm learning from you. So Rick, any final words?
Yeah, before we wrap up, a good catalyzing statement informs yes or no. If we're going to send a man to the moon by the end of the 60s, yes or no, does this decision get us there quicker? And if the answer is, well, Mr. Kennedy, I've got this material, it's going to take me 10 years to develop. Well, no, it's not going to work because we need to get to the moon and back in 8 years. A really good catalyzing statement is a decision-making tool, yes or no. And so when my wife and I make decisions in our family, we say, is this decision going to make our kids independent 18-year-olds or dependent pain in the asses? And so we cut a lot of things out. Domino's Pizza, is this decision going to get the pizza there faster? So you got to look at this from that serious point of view that, wow, this could actually help me get where I want to get to in my family, in my life, in my church, etc.
It sounds so simple. What a concept. Rick, so great conversation.
Get your purpose statement locked down. Get your catalyzing statement locked down for all the areas of your life that are important to you. Thanks for listening.
You have just experienced Money for Life. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. Have a blessed day.